it without having to be a socialist or agree with their political agenda to achieve the goal. We just watched the most diverse.
I don't understand what a socialist.
We just watched the most diverse.
Black Lives Matter.
Where is the facts matter
Republican
banner,
history
facts first
with black-
banner from
with black
CNN right
Republicans.
now? Mike, you're lying. You're just lying. They're not socialists. These people who founded the organization are friends of mine. Pardon my tone, but my God, you are lying on an organization. Your rhetoric is the reason why these people have to have security. Stop. Just stop. You're lying on the organization. It's not socialist
Angela,
to say that black people should be able to live and thrive in this country.
I find it
is
ironic.
not socialist to say that black people should be paid the same as white people. It is not socialist to say that we want
This
to
is
be
where we are,
woke and
guys.
we encourage you to be woke.
You asked me
It is
to come
not
on and share-
socialist to say that you
And
should
this
be
is
an
what- this is
ally
how a lot of
and line on
conservatives
this
feel.
organization. Stop.
This is how a lot of conservatives feel. The entire 8 years that I opposed Barack Obama, I was called a racist just for opposing Barack Obama. I'm trying to have a conversation with you, represent my views and the views of a lot of conservatives. I get shouted down, I get called a racist, and I'm basically told that my opinion doesn't matter. So
No,
we had a
Mike, what
moment
you're
this
being
summer
told is you're
after
a
George
liar
Floyd was
right
killed.
now.
Let me finish. Angela, please let me finish. We had a moment
you
this
say
summer after
something
George
honest?
Floyd was killed.
Let him finish, Angela.
We had a moment this summer when George Floyd was killed, and I saw something I had never seen. Republicans on social media, friends of mine, so many people saying, I finally get it. I see what's going on. I understand this. And the problem that I saw after that was they were not opened.
Right.
The door was not open to them. People like Angela do not want us to come and have this conversation with them. They want to shout us down. They don't want to hear our
Mike,
perspective.
let me ask you this.
And
Mike,
that is
let-
extremely frustrating when you try to have a conversation like
Okay, Mike, let me jump in here. Let me ask you this. Because you said that it took George Floyd. Okay, fine. People, that is what it is. But for people like, and back to what Chris was talking about, for people like me and for people like Angela, we wonder, why did it take you so long? Especially if you have been in an Alabama or a Louisiana or a Kenosha
I understand
or
that.
New York City or a Los Angeles or anywhere in this country. How could you be an American and not see what is happening with another fellow American who happens to be black or brown? And if someone calls you on it and says that it is that you have a racial bias, an unconscious bias, and perhaps racism, how can you defend that and say that it's not? Because you either have ignored it or you have the privilege of not thinking about it. And it
I
could
think it's a
fall
great
under
question,
any
though.
of those umbrellas. Racism is not about knowing it outright. It's also about not knowing it. It's called ignorance. So why would you take
also called them blind spots.
Yeah,
And
well,
it could be a blind spot.
It could be a blind spot. It could be
Yeah.
ignorance. It could be unconscious
All right,
bias.
so let
or
him say
any
what it
other-
is.
But I'm not
Let-
finished. I'm not finished with what I'm saying, and I will let him say what it
All
is.
right, all
All
right.
right, stand by. So how can you say that and take offense to someone calling you on it instead of explaining it or trying to understand what the other person is saying and admitting, well, maybe there is. And if you do admit, well, maybe there is, we might come to some sort of consensus about it.
That's fair.
That's actually my point, Don, which is if someone has been ignorant, and I'm not saying that George Floyd, I already saw this before George Floyd. What I'm saying is that for someone else, someone who has not seen it before, and there's a moment in the country where something happens that has woken people up and they've started to understand this, do you want to have a conversation and say, oh, you finally get it, thank God? Or do you say, you know what, you finally get it, but I'm still angry, you should have gotten it already, so I still don't want to talk to you? What signal
No,
does that
it's
send
both.
to people
No,
who want to have a
it's both.
conversation
I
about
can
race?
still be angry with you and still want to talk to you. It's not that I'm going to not be angry anymore. You can be angry, but I agree with you. You should still continue the conversation.
If you want to
But
solve the
can't-
problem,
but
we
you-
need to be able to open up and
You
have these
cannot
conversations.
give
But
people
Don- but
parameters
Don
and
and Mike-
ultimatums. You have to be open to whatever the person's reaction is.
But also,
I'm asking Angela to be open to my reaction. That's what I'm asking
but
for. I want to
think-
hear her
I think
perspective.
that- I think there's a difference
Gotta go, though.
between
Nah,
being
why
open.
go?
Okay?
No, why go? Because I got to tell you something. I think this is the issue that very well wins this election for the president.
Yeah.
Angela, I know I've talked to you about this. I've talked to Don about this. I think it's very hard to convince people that they have implicit bias or blind spots or anything. Politics does not work well when there's any element of anything that can be construed as blame. And it's a problem in politics. It always has been. That's why politicians are always telling people it's not their fault, whatever's going on. And selling fear works. And I'm telling you, what's happening in Wisconsin right now works better for the president than it does for Joe Biden. And if it wins him Wisconsin, it could win him the election.
I agree.
And I don't know what the answer is, but I know it's a problem. Yeah. And I know pointing it out that Trump is wrong, Trump is enabling it, I don't think it's going to work because the numbers are going the other way. The question is, what is the solution to the violence which seems to be helping this president, even though it's happening
Well,
on
that's
his
two
watch?
things, Chris. You're talking about a political thing in a campaign and a strategy to win
That's
a
where we
campaign.
are.
And also, yes, we are. But also, we're also talking about on a larger level, a longer-term level, is how do we, as Americans, white, black, whatever, have this conversation. You can't put parameters on people. And, Mike, you can't expect people who have been discriminated against for their entire lives, whether you knew about it or not to be angry, not to be upset, not to sometimes call names. Is it right? Does it feel good? No. But you cannot say I understand and then try to set the parameters for the conversation, because then that also plays into privilege. So when you are arguing with a loved one, there's no parameters about what you can say. You may do it out of respect for someone else, but you don't tell them, no, you can't say this. That's not honesty. So you have to meet people where they are, and sometimes you got to get beat up, and people call you names, and you get mad, and it doesn't feel good.
No.
It doesn't feel
I
good.
hear that, Don. I hear what you're saying, but my point is, I can't argue with anything you just said. My point is, if you want to have reconciliation, then you've got to be able to meet people in the middle. And what I saw this summer was that people it was like silence is violence. So like, if I say something, it's the wrong thing to say. If I don't say something, it's the wrong thing to say. And I saw some conservatives whose hearts were opened by what happened throw their hands up from the process and say, there's nothing I can do about this. And I think that was terrible. There was a moment
I agree
when
with
they
you.
could have
I agree with you 100%. So, but why is that? Why are you afraid? Why are you afraid of what might happen if someone disagrees with you? Or if someone raises their voice at you? Why are you afraid of being called racist? If you just admit that you might be in some sense, why are you afraid of
Because
that?
it's used as a weapon, Don. It's not an open conversation to say, you know, Mike, there's some things that you did that you may not realize are racist. Let's have a conversation. It is, you're a racist, you're a Republican. If you have these views, you're obviously a racist. And then it's used as a weapon to beat me politically or to besmirch my reputation. And so then that tells me I better not even engage in this conversation because there's a penalty for me having this
And
conversation.
what's the penalty?
But
What's the penalty? Hold on one second. What's the
Well, if Mike
penalty?
Shields,
What
admits,
is
if
the-
Mike Shields were to admit that he's a racist, I'm not saying he is. I don't think he is, but he's done. By the way, there's no.
But
there's
John,
no.
how
there-
so?
but-
How so?
Because there is no virtue in that kind of acknowledgement in our media culture. He'd be banned from CNN. He wouldn't be on TV anymore. No campaign would want to go near him. He wouldn't have anybody want to publish his pieces except like the Washington
I have
Examiner.
a racial blind spot or a racial bias, or
Well, that's
maybe,
different.
Or maybe
That's
there's something. No, maybe there's something in me that is racist. I don't think he would be banned from anything. I think people would applaud him.
I think you call yourself a racist. I think you got big
Sorry,
trouble.
I've been just trying to chime in
Okay,
here for
go ahead,
just a minute.
Angela.
Go ahead.
Just really quickly, Mike, I heard you say some things that sounded racist to me. They didn't sound that different from words I heard used by the President of the United States tonight. You started by bashing the Democratic Convention as a wokeness convention, and once upon a time, not long ago, woke was a very positive thing. It was a way to inspire people to consciousness, to see something they hadn't seen before. Then when you talked about George Floyd and people getting jumped on because it was uncomfortable, imagine what it's like when police lights come up behind someone who's just driving and they're terrified because they're black. So yes, it may not always be comfortable to have these conversations, but it is imperative to have the conversation. When you also call Black Lives Matter and distinguish between Black Lives Mattering little b versus big B, when there was a whole conversation right after George Floyd about capitalizing the B so we're no longer deemed as inferior, it's triggering to me because I hear you saying that the only way my life can matter is if it stays inferior. Additionally, you used a right-wing a far right-wing talking point and a trope against BLM by calling them socialist. Those women are my friends, and I know them very well, and they're not socialist. So when you say things that sound racist, I'm going to call them racist. It is not to target you. It is not to ensure that you don't get another job, but it is to make you aware of what could be a blind spot because it is dangerous. And because of that rhetoric, they get death threats. Can you understand why that might be troubling to me if they are my friends?
Let me say this. We do have to go because we do have to get to a commercial. But, Mike, I'm glad we had this conversation. And I invite you back to have this conversation as often as you are willing to come back to have it. That is the only way we're going to change things. It may feel like a pile-on. I don't mean to pile onto you. What I'm trying to do is trying to get us to come to some sort of consensus. Yes, I understand it hurts and that it feels bad. But there are things in everyday life that Angela and I go through that you guys don't go through that feel bad every single day. And it's not just someone calling you out for it. It's things that happen every day, little things. And so those things hurt as well. We're just trying to get you to understand. And guess what? I don't believe in cancel culture. I think you should be commended for having the conversation that you have. I don't believe in canceling people because they make a mistake or for something they did 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever, or even something they did and they apologize for it and they're truly sorry for it. I don't believe in that. So the whole cancel culture thing, listen, and people painting you with racist and you won't be allowed on a network, I think that's BS. So listen, my brother, come back and talk about this, and let's meet wherever you say we can meet and have this conversation, and I think that's what every American should do. I don't judge you for this conversation. I don't think poorly of you. I think better of you for it. And he went away.
That's right, he left. See, you already canceled him. You canceled him more than you were saying you would, and you did it.
I didn't cancel him. And we had trouble with his
Insult to
signal
injury,
earlier.
and then the screen went black. You see? And that's why he wins, Don.
Cancel
That's
Mike
why he
Shields.
wins.